In all likelihood, we are now playing for what's ahead. And what's ahead is actually pretty bright for the Dallas Cowboys. You have Quinnen Williams under contract for the next couple of years. The trade for Logan Wilson has been great. You got a bunch of those defenders back healthy. And even though they didn't show up or show it in the loss to Detroit, that defense had been playing much better. There is hope for the future in Dallas because of the way they've rebuilt this defense, because they have players on offense. Well, we'd like to thank the Dallas Cowboys for their participation in the 2025 regular NFL season and wish them all the best in their future endeavors, because this season is over. It is done. However, there is good news on the horizon, which we will get to. But first, let us commence with the burial rites. According to the NFL, the Cowboys have about a 6% chance of making the postseason. And quite frankly, that might be generous at this point. Because after the loss Thursday night to the Detroit Lions, the Cowboys now would lose head-to-head tiebreakers with the Lions, who are squarely in the wild card hunt, the Carolina Panthers, who might win the division, but are squarely in the wild card hunt, and the Chicago Bears, who currently have the number 1 overall seed, but they got to play the Packers on a massive game this coming Sunday, and we don't know how that's going to go and what that may do to them. So right away they lose the head-to-head tiebreaker with 3 teams in front of them that they have played and lost to. Well, then you say, okay, well, there's still the possibility for the Dallas Cowboys to win the NFC East, which is, by the way, probably their best chance to make it to the postseason. And we have certainly seen the Eagles stumbling down the stretch. There is no question about that. So the Cowboys are now at 6-6-1. The best record they can have is 10-6-1. Okay? So if they're at 10-6-1, to get past the Eagles are going to have to go to 10-7. Right? Or we throw a tie in there and then all hell breaks loose and we break out the nerdoramas with the slide rules and the algorithms to figure that shit out. But at the end of the day, if you're a Cowboys fan, you're thinking, hey, the Eagles can't win more than 10 games. So let's take a look at the remaining schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, they've lost 2 in a row. Then they go, this Monday night, they go to the Chargers. Now, granted, Justin Herbert's dealing with a fractured hand. The Eagles' offense, as we've talked about since the beginning of the season on Straight Facts Homie, when we tried to tell you that Saquon was not going to be Saquon from 2024 and 2025, I hope you listened because, oh yeah, all those critics that told me I was crazy, you're not saying that now. He ain't the same guy, and we tried to tell you why. Whether or not you chose to listen, that's your problem. So the Eagles' offense is still stuck in neutral because of Saquon Barkley. So let's assume they could lose to the Chargers, right? Well, then they get the Raiders. The Raiders last played a meaningful game in 1943. So that's not an issue. And then they get the Commanders in Washington. Could they lose that game? Maybe, not likely. Then they go to Buffalo. They could lose that game. All right? So now you look at the Eagles. They have 2 more losses, let's just say, theoretically, to the Chargers and the Bills. For them to get to 7 losses, they're going to have to lose a game to either the Raiders, the Commanders, or wait for it, the Commanders. Now, stranger things have happened, and especially in the NFC East, stranger things have happened, where we haven't had a team repeat in this division in over 20 years. The last team to do it was the Philadelphia Eagles, who won it 4 straight years right around the turn of the century. And no team has repeated in the NFC East since that time, including a couple of years ago when the Cowboys finished 12-5. And they had that crazy win over Detroit when Taylor Decker was allegedly did not report himself eligible on what looked like to be a game-winning 2-point conversion at the end of that game. And the Eagles fell apart at the end of that season. They fell apart down the stretch, had to go the wild card route, lost in the first round to Tampa Bay on the road. So it's possible. Is it likely? Absolutely not. For all the Eagles' problems, and they have a ton of problems, it's hard for me to say with a straight face that I can believe they're going to find a way to lose to either the Commanders or the Raiders. I can give you the Chargers. I can see that. Absolutely Buffalo. I can see that. No question about it. But are they going to lose? I mean, if they lose to the Commanders or the Raiders, then the Eagles really got problems. And that's the best way for the Cowboys to get into the postseason. So in all likelihood, we are now playing for what's ahead. And what's ahead is actually pretty bright for the Dallas Cowboys. You have Quinnen Williams under contract for the next couple of years. The trade for Logan Wilson has been great. You got a bunch of those defenders back healthy. And even though they didn't show up or show it in the loss to Detroit, that defense had been playing much better. Look, the Cowboys have been riding a roller coaster of emotion since the death of their teammate, the trade of Quinnen Williams. They played 4 games in 18 days. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. And they fought. Well, most of them fought. We'll get to that in a minute. The defense is better than it was in the first 9 games of the season because they got healthy and they got Quinnen Williams. You got Demarion Overshown back. You got some of the defensive secondary back. You still don't have Travion Diggs back. So we'll see what happens with him and whether or not he's going to come back in what now appears to be a lost season for the Dallas Cowboys. You have building blocks. You have building blocks on the defensive side of the ball, and that has been reimagined without Micah Parsons. I want to be 100% clear. None of this excuses the idea of trading away a generational talent in his prime. None of it. But they found a way to work around that buffoonery and make it work. Still doesn't authenticate or compensate for the stupidity of that move, but you found a way to work around it, okay? So now you look in the offensive side of the ball. Dak is Dak. He's playing very, very well, even though they lost the turnover battle 3-0 in that Thursday night loss to the Lions. And oh, by the way, another glaring example of why not all interceptions on the quarterback was in that game. We will get to that in a minute. You have a running back that they've sort of taken off the scrap heap in Javonte Williams, and they're only paying him $3 million a year. With the way he's played, he's going to require a significantly higher upgrade in salary. I mean, right now in the Cowboys' offensive backfield, your quarterback is being outpaid over your running back by a ratio of 20-1. 20-1. Dak's making 60. Javonte Williams is making 3. That inequity has to be dealt with. The offensive line did not look great last night for the Dallas Cowboys, but they've invested so much capital in that offensive line, and they've had some injuries there, a bunch of them. I think if they get healthy, the offensive line looks pretty good. You have 2 wide receivers out there. CeeDee Lamb, who was great, concussion last night, may have changed the game a little bit. Then you have George Pickens. It's time to talk about George Pickens. George Pickens has been one of the best offseason moves by any team in the NFL. He has absolutely lit it up. He has electric talent. He has as many skills, as many physical traits as any other wide receiver in the NFL. So why did the Pittsburgh Steelers decide they wanted to move on from George Pickens? Because of what you saw Thursday night. Okay? Here's the problem with George Pickens. That guy and the way he played Thursday night just shows up. At some point during the season, that guy shows up and you look at him like, where are you? What are you thinking? What are you doing? And if you can go back and find it, you will recall that when they made the move to trade for George Pickens, I say this is a very interesting move because you can go back and find the game in the 2024 season where George Pickens just decided not to participate. And it was a Sunday night game against the Dallas Cowboys in Pittsburgh when the Cowboys went in there and won, and Pickens was loafing routes. He knew he wasn't getting the ball. He didn't seem to care. He didn't even try. And then what happened last night in a game that is essentially an all-in game? You got to have it. This is the only way to capitalize on the momentum of beating the Raiders and beating the Eagles and the Chiefs in back-to-back weeks, the 2 teams that participated in the Super Bowl a year ago, is to keep this thing rolling. Well, on the interception to start the second half, Dak Prescott threw a perfect pass to George Pickens. It bounced right off his hands or chest. Barnes picks it up, sets the Lions up for an easy touchdown to really put them in control of the game when they went up 27-9 after that one. And then there was another route later on in that game where George Clearly wasn't the first option on the play. He was running down the left sidelines, sort of just loafed it around there, turned around, and Dak fired him the ball. And what did Pickens do? He just stood there. He didn't go back to the ball, which allowed the defender to close on the ball and knock it away. And you could see the death stare from Dak looking at George Pickens like, bro, what are you doing? And then the piece de resistance, when the Cowboys had to have 2 scores to make it a game late. Pickens beats the double team, and Dak drops a perfect throw in the bucket, and George just stopped running. He didn't even lift his hands to try and find the ball or even make an attempt to catch the ball. You know the play I'm talking about. Go watch that play 5 times. Go watch that play 5 times. Every time you see it, it gets worse. And what made this worse for the Cowboys and Pickens, a lot of these plays happened after CeeDee Lamb had left the game with a concussion. So if you're a competitor, if you're an athlete, if you care, you say to yourself at that point, that guy's down, I got to pick up the slack. The exact opposite happened. The exact opposite happened. And then there was that shot of Pickens on the sidelines. It looked like he had just vanished mentally. I don't know where he went, but he wasn't in the game. He wasn't in the game. The film never lies. People will say to you something after the game, this, and this. Go watch the tape. That interception to start the second half on George Pickens. That comeback route where he stopped and didn't go back to the ball on George Pickens. On that drive where they had to have a score, and they eventually got one, a field goal. But, I mean, in that situation, he beats the double team. Dak makes a perfect throw. He doesn't even try for the ball. So if you're Jerry Jones, and God bless you if you are, because that's an interesting place to be, what do you do now with George Pickens? Before, it was like, yeah, we're going to have to franchise tag him and then work out some sort of deal. You want to do that now? You want to do that now? Because this, like, for all the other good things that he's done, let's be clear, George has done wonderful things all season long for the Dallas Cowboys. Keep it going. The most important game is the next one. So for all the things he did right against Kansas City, and in the second half, he came alive against the Chiefs. He really kept drives alive in the second half against the Chiefs when the Cowboys had to move the chains. For all the electric things he's done all season long. In the most important game of the season, let's not sugarcoat it. That was the most, all the other stuff doesn't matter if they can't beat the Lions. And George gave minimal effort. Richard Sherman was right on the money with what he had to say after the game about George Pickens. The effort wasn't there. So are you really willing to sign over a massive amount of money, basically, essentially what you're paying CeeDee Lamb, to a guy who did that in the most important game of the season? That's a real question mark. And if I'm the Cowboys, and if I'm Brian Schottenheimer, who, by the way, has done an amazing job as a first-year head coach, I need to see George Pickens show me effort on these final few games of the season. Every snap, every play, every game, every series, to even think about justifying that contract that he thinks he's going to get. Someone's going to pay him. There's no question about it. But again, there's a reason Pittsburgh moved on. There's a reason that there have been questions about George. And now let's get to the other thing from this game. The Jake Ferguson offensive pass interference. It wasn't pass interference. We all know that. That's a legal swim move. Alex Anzalone tweeted something out. Oh, my body doesn't turn that. Whatever, bro. That's hand fighting. That's not a PI. You know, I can't tell you how many times in that game that the referee of Terry McAuliffe, I think it is, basically said, yeah, that's not this, that's not that. So even the official expert that they had in the booth for Prime was like, that's not offensive pass interference. It's also not why the Cowboys lost the game. It has nothing to do with why the Cowboys lost the game. Cowboys lost the game because they lost a turnover battle, 3-0. They allowed Jahmyr Gibbs to rush for 3 touchdowns. They gave up 4 rushing touchdowns. They allowed 44 points. The Lions sacked Dak 5 times. To put that in perspective, the Lions had 4 sacks in their previous 4 games. They got 5 Thursday night. They pressured him 20 times. He was pressured 10 times in the fourth quarter alone. That offensive line, which has had some injuries, wore down. These are the reasons why the Cowboys lost the game. The penalties had nothing to do with it. And I've heard people say, especially on social media, clearly the Cowboys, the NFL doesn't want the Cowboys in the playoff picture. By the way, these were some of the same people that when the Chiefs were called for 10 penalties against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, well, the Cowboys, clearly the NFL wants the Cowboys in the playoff picture with some of these penalties that have been called against the Chiefs. A hold on Josh Simmons, which was not a hold. It was a perfect block that happened to have that guy fall on the ground. He wasn't holding. A couple of those offensive pass interferences, Gene Steratore, the CBS/Paramount referee official, was like, guys, those are ticky-tacky calls. A couple of them on Trent McDuffie. So you can't in one game say, oh, the NFL wants the Cowboys in the playoffs because of all these penalties they're calling against the Chiefs. And in the very next game, say, well, clearly the NFL doesn't want the Cowboys in the playoff picture. First of all, the NFL does want the Cowboys in the playoff picture. 57.5. That's the number of viewers times 1,000,000 that the Cowboys and Chiefs generated in that Thanksgiving Day game. Clearly, if the NFL is honest about it, they would love to have the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Steelers, the Giants, all those teams in the postseason every year because that's going to guarantee massive playoff ratings. What I'm trying to tell you is NFL refs are just terrible. They're terrible. They're bad in every game. You just happen to see more on the primetime games. And that's why the conspiracy theories about the Chiefs last year, despite all the data saying it's not true, fueled everybody's imagination because you saw more Chiefs games. Last year, the Chiefs played a game on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Tuesday was the only game of the week the Chiefs didn't play a game last year. You saw Kansas City Chiefs games more than you could possibly imagine. And you saw bad refereeing in the Chiefs games. The bad refereeing is in every game. You just don't see them all the time. So stop with this conspiracy theory about the refs. The only thing you can say about NFL referees on a consistent basis is that they're awful. They're awful. That's it. They're not for one side. They're not for the other side. They're just on the side of being really, really bad at their jobs. And I'll tell you a couple stories about that. I'm not going to tell you the name of this guy, but I once was sitting with a former NFL referee who, for a time, worked with one of the networks as their official guy in the booth. And he said to me, Trey, when I was refereeing, I thought that we did an amazing job as referees. And then I started watching the way fans and you watch the game, and I thought to myself, we are terrible at this. So they know it, they acknowledge it because they're at a handicap. The referees see the game on a linear level. On a linear level. They're on the field, they see it this way. You, me, the coaching staff watching film, every fan watching at home, we see the game on a digital level. 360 degrees from every possible angle. They don't see that. That's why the expedited review has been coming in more and more because the NFL realizes we are really handicapping these guys with the way they see the game as opposed to the way players and fans and coaches see the game. It's completely different. You also remember a few years ago that incredible non-call in the NFC Championship game between the Rams and the Saints when the Saints were driving down and they could have bled the clock out with a field goal to win that game in regulation. And there was a massive, obvious pass interference call against Nickel Roby-Coleman, the linebacker for the Rams. I mean, he absolutely decleated the Saints running back, I can't remember his name, when he was out trying to catch a flat route. I mean, it was the most obvious pass interference you will ever see in your life. No call. Not a single call. The next year, I was flying back from doing something for ESPN in LA, and I was sitting next to this guy, and he had his laptop open, and he was going through all his notes and writing things down on a game. I said, oh, do you work for a team? He goes, no, I work for the NFL. I said, oh, what do you do? I said, I'm a referee. And I said, let me ask you a question. About that pass interference that wasn't called in the NFC Championship game between the Rams and the Saints. And he sort of put his head down and shook, and he said, I was the side judge in that game. None of us saw it. None of us thought it was pass interference. They're handicapped. The NFL refs are handicapped by the way they have to watch the game and by the way we actually see the game. It was the most obvious pass interference call you will ever see, and not a single member of that crew thought it was pass interference because they're seeing it this way and we're seeing it this way. So get rid of the conspiracy theories for the referees. They are handicapped by the way they see the game as opposed to the way we see the game, which is why the Chiefs' proposal of a few years ago of a sky judge was the greatest invention or greatest idea ever. It's very simple. Have a referee sit there and say, guys, you missed this one. Guys, that wasn't this. We need to fix that. And the NFL has sort of done that without doing that with this expedited review, including the safety. And by the way, I'm sorry, the safety thing is ridiculous. If you're tackled 3 yards in the end zone, I don't care where the ball was when the contact was initiated. You're tackled in the end zone, that's a safety, okay? The nuance, well, the ball was, no, you're 3 yards deep in the end zone. Safety, okay? That's one of the more ridiculous rules in the NFL. It's a safety, okay? The ball was pointing out at the point of contact. Where was he tackled? Where was he tackled? By that rule, if a running back is touched at the line of scrimmage and then he falls backward and is tackled, where do they spot him? They spot him 3 yards behind where he was tackled, not where the contact was initiated. It should be the same rule. Separate issue entirely. I digress. The NFL is not for one team or the other when it comes to refs. The NFL employs part-time referees because that's the way the NFL referees union wants it, because they have cushy jobs and they do this as a hobby and they make good money on it, okay? The NFL would love to have full-time refs. The refs don't want that because they'd have to give up their jobs as lawyers, bankers, businessmen, all this other stuff. So it's the NFL refs that want to keep the situation the way it is. The NFL would love to have full-time refs, but there's a lot of money that these guys make by double dipping. NFL refs are not for or against your team. The NFL refs are terrible. The NFL refs are handicapped by the way they see the game. Let's just make that what it is. The Dallas Cowboys lost, not because of the refs, because they lost the turnover battle, because they couldn't block anybody, because they couldn't stop anybody defensively, and one of their best players decided not to participate in a must-win game. That's why the Cowboys lost. There is hope for the future in Dallas because of the way they've rebuilt this defense, because they have players on offense. They're going to have to pay Javonte Williams. They're going to have to figure out whether or not they want to pay George Pickens. And if that game Thursday night doesn't make them think long and hard about whether or not they should, then the Cowboys have no business evaluating talent to begin with. And that is straight facts.